All right, what you can see are visuals of family members of Israeli hostages that have been held in Gaza. They're viewing a video released by Hamas on Monday. The video shows three women sitting side by side against a bare wall. One of them addresses an angry message to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She asks to be taken home in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned this video as cruel psychological propaganda. Interestingly, China, on the other hand, is also trying to become a peace broker amidst this escalating war between Hamas and Israel. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi discussed the conflict with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and there are hopes that China will make use of its relations with Iran to de-escalate the war. Remember, Wang Yi was on a tour to the United States, and during the high-level talks that took place, of course, the conflict between Hamas and Israel was also a priority. But can China be the country that puts an end to this deadly war? China's first statement on the conflict angered Israel, since China did not condemn Hamas nor mention Israel's right to defend itself. China faces a difficult balancing act because it has long openly sympathized with the Palestinian guest. Where is this war headed, and how deeply divided is the current geopolitical climate? Let's try and get in a sense of perspective, and for that, let me introduce my guest today. I'm joined in by Lauren Tomlinson, a senior advisor of the Senate Intelligence Committee. She's also been the former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you so much for joining in, Lauren. Of course, there is no question more burning than whether Israel's attacks on Gaza will endanger these hostages. The state does not have the mandate to sacrifice these hostages in this war. I'd like your thoughts.
I think that any time that you are dealing with a hostage situation, especially a terrorist organization that is using hostages as human shields to prevent against their own deaths, you are going to run a very risky operation. I think Israel is going to take every chance that it can, every precaution to make sure that they try to gather as many of these hostages as they can and get them to safety. We have to have a lot of faith here that Israel is doing the right thing, our greatest hope is that they get these hostages out alive. However, in the fog of war, during all of these things that are happening, Israel does have to move forward and eliminate the Hamas terrorist threat against their greater people. So there is a balance there, but I do hope that every instance is taken, every precaution is taken to get these hostages home safely.
Lauren, do you see a shift in the US stance where it is now pushing Israel for a humanitarian pause, even though not a ceasefire? What explains Washington's abrupt policy shift?
I believe that Washington right now is urging calm because there is concern that Israel is going to not allow the Palestinian civilians to exit in a timely manner. And that is obviously, there's a lot of issues there with the geopolitics not having enough space in the surrounding Arab nations to take these refugees, the Hamas not letting the UN trucks in. There's a lot going on there. However, I do think that the United States is urging this caution and this calm and these pauses to make sure that there are at least opportunities to negotiate and try our best to save as many civilian lives as possible. I don't see this as a huge shift in Washington policy. I think that we very much, the United States very much supports Israel's right to defend itself and right to eliminate this existential threat to their people. However, there does need to be every instance to take care of these civilians, as we've discussed.
Lauren, how do you weigh in on Chinese engagement in the Hamas-Israel conflict? Is it superficial? Also, what does China have to gain?
China has a lot to gain because they are looking to disrupt kind of the Western world order, the world order that promotes democracy and freedom and human rights. And they very much want to be a representative of not only authoritarian governments, but also the global South. And they want to position themselves as a leader and a broker for the global South and Arab nations. However, because they do not have a strong foothold in the Middle East, besides Iran, they are very limited in what they can do from a diplomatic standpoint. I think that the reason why the United States is bringing in China at this point and asking for their help is because of the fear that Iran could potentially escalate this situation. And so keeping them neutral, even though they're not entirely neutral because they trained Hamas, but keeping them on the sidelines, at least on opening another front as Israel deals with this threat, is really important. And so that's where China can probably provide the best value. They are Iran's greatest trading partner. They did negotiate the normalization agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they have been very vocal on support for Iranian issues, including renegotiating the Iranian nuclear deal. So they are aligned with Iran. They have inroads there, and that is probably their greatest diplomacy value, even though they really don't have a standing with Israel or anyone else in the Middle East in order to properly be able to negotiate peace.
All right, we leave it at that. Many thanks to you, Lauren Tomlinson, for sharing those precious insights with us here at News 18 Global. Now, let's quickly give you a roundup of what has exactly happened as far as that video is concerned. Now, some family members of Israelis that have been held hostage in Gaza on Monday shared a ray of hope as Hamas released that video, making them hopeful that their loved ones are still alive. This video shows 3 women sitting side by side against a bare wall. Needless to say, Netanyahu has been requested that they be taken home in this exchange for Palestinian prisoners. The Israeli Prime Minister, nonetheless, has condemned the video as cruel psychological propaganda. Here's a report.
Israel's Prime Minister condemned a video that Hamas had released on Monday that shows 3 female hostages seized by the Islamist movement on October 7th. In the video, which is being watched on this phone, one of the hostages criticizes Benjamin Netanyahu for failing to protect Israeli citizens during the deadly attack and failing to get them back home. She purportedly calls for a deal to secure their release in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Netanyahu, in a statement, condemned the clip from Hamas as cruel propaganda. Israel's leader is coming under pressure over his handling of the crisis. Dozens of people attended a protest in Tel Aviv to call for the hostages' release. Shiri Grossbard is a close friend of one of the hostages, Yelena Tripanov.
I'm not a political person. I'm not the one with the answers, but I do know this. No other country in the world would have 239 of their people being kept hostage and not do anything about it. No politics, just bring them home now. 24 days is way too long for these people to be kept in captivity.
According to Israeli authorities, at least 239 hostages were taken captive by Hamas gunmen during the October 7th attack, which killed at least 1,400 people. The presence of the hostages in Gaza has complicated Israel forces' ground operation in the enclave, but Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire. Gaza health authorities say more than 8,300 people, many of them children, have been killed in Israeli attacks since Hamas' assault.
The ground action actually creates the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility of getting our hostages out, because Hamas will not do it unless they're under pressure. They simply will not do it.
On Monday, Israel said its forces had freed their first hostage during its Gaza ground offensive, a female soldier who Hamas captured in its October 7th raid. Israel's security agency released a photo of the soldier, Ori Megadish, surrounded by family members after her rescue. In her hometown of Kiryat Gat, residents cheered after news of her release. Since the October 7th attack, Hamas has released 4 hostages through back-channel efforts coordinated by Qatar.